Welcome to the Rock's Back Pages podcast. I'm sitting here with my colleague Jasper Murison-Bowie.
Hi, Barney.
Hi, Jasper. We're not here with our colleague Mark Pringle, who is sunning himself on a beach in Crete, and of course is much missed, particularly his inimitable laugh, which perhaps we'll try and duplicate it.
We've done that gag already, so we just do it again, just make it a running one.
No, we'll actually stick his own laugh in at some point, won't we? So anyway, you are missed, Mark, greatly. I hope you're having fun.
Hope you're having a miserable time.
Yes, actually.
Just because I'm jealous.
Let's get honest, yeah. I hope it's pouring.
Although it's
rain.
sunny today here in London, which is quite nice.
Quite muggy, quite sunny. Fascinating, I'm sure, to any listeners who don't live in London. It's Thursday, it's sort of midday, isn't it?
About that. And
this is where we find ourselves, in a slightly muggy, sunny London without Mark Pringle. Anyway, to matters at hand. We're going to be talking about everything that's new on Rock's Back Page, including the free features. And they are Rickie Lee Jones and the late Harry Doherty. Rickie Lee is going to release a new album in a week or so. It's a covers album called Kicks.
Covers of what, may I ask?
Covers of songs. She's done a few covers albums now.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you whether this is the sort of third or the fourth.
Uh-huh.
And it may be that she's run out of kind of original ideas, but she's an interesting interpreter. Have you listened at all to Rickie Lee?
I can't say that I have, although when we talked about this yesterday, you said I'd probably like her, so perhaps I should.
I think you should.
Okay, well,
I think
will.
you like some stuff.
Yeah, having read a few pieces about her now, I think I'd be interested to hear certainly what she has to say and what sound it is, because you kind of described it as sort of slightly jazzy.
Definitely jazzy, you know. I mean, you must know Chucky's in Love.
I'm sure I've heard it.
Everybody knows Chucky's in Love.
Yeah.
That was her hugest hit. It was a massive hit, and I think it caught even her by surprise, because she was really was almost like an overnight success. The first of the three pieces about Rickie Lee, it doesn't even mention Chucky's in Love, which one of the hardest things to do online is to find out when. If a song went to number one, or what it went to find out exactly when it went to number one. I mean, you can go to the Billboard site.
Yeah.
I guess you could find out. But so I'm thinking that this piece by Mick Farren in NME in 1979 was actually written before Chucky's in Love even got to number 4. Yeah. So it's kind of Mickey Farren, who was an English writer living in LA at the time, talking to this Warner Brothers artiste and kind of placing her in the context of something that he knew very well, which is kind of beat literature, and he mentions both Rickie Lee and her boyfriend Tom Waits in the context of sort of Damon Runyon, 40s jazz nostalgia, a world where Nick the Greek slips through the shadows and Jack Kerouac could show up at any moment in a beat-up Hudson. And that's very much the kind of shtick that Rickie Lee, and to a degree Tom Waits, her beau, they
were together for a while, right?
They were, and they were sort of one of pop's great couples in some ways.
Power couple.
Well, I don't know. Power couple doesn't feel right, Jasper. But in hindsight, one might argue that they were living the life that they were singing about, and he was living at the Tropicana Motel, the almost infamous motel in West Hollywood, and his little kind of bungalow was a complete kind of wreck. You could barely even get in the door for all the sort of albums and books and paraphernalia around. But they ran around town sort of kind of wreaking havoc.
Sure.
She is the girl on the cover of Blue Valentine, his 1978 album. So she wasn't even signed at that point.
Really? Okay.
She was this kind of gangster's mole type character. Anyway, so she was signed by Warner Brothers on the basis of the fact that 2 or 3 people had done songs she'd written.
Okay.
Lowell George did a song of hers called Easy Money. And she was given a pretty big budget to make this first album, and the cream of the kind of Warner Brothers session guys, and Chucky's in Love was a huge hit. I'm a huge fan of hers, I have to say, although it's based mainly on the records she made at the turn of that decade. So the two other pieces reference this, her second album, Pirates, which for me is just one of the greatest records ever made.
Okay,
I think it's an extraordinary... It's a kind of song suite loosely about, mainly about her breakup with Tom Waits, which was really devastating for her. She had problems anyway, Rickie Lee. She had a pretty traumatic and itinerant childhood, and so by the time she was with Waits, she was behind his back, so dabbling in heroin.
Yeah.
When he broke up with her, she really kind of hit.
Yeah, one of the things I read in one of
hard.
I think in the retrospective piece, which is the third piece that we've got, and she talks about that whole drug problem a bit more, and kind of how she went from taking heroin, as you were just saying, to taking coke, and that not really going very well for her, and she feels it doesn't agree with her, and then she ends up in hospital, and so it's obviously she had a troubled sort of 80s
she had
time.
I know someone who interviewed her around that time in London, and the interview was on kind of, let's say, the 9th floor of a hotel, and she was seeing people outside the window, and he realised she was in trouble.
Yeah.
There's no one outside the window. I don't think anyone's cleaning the windows today. So she did kind of lose the plot, and I think it had something to do with the breakup from Waits. She was really devastated when he left her. And he may have left her partly because of her drug problems, that she just couldn't... He was pretty wild. He was an alcoholic at that point.
Yeah.
But she was too wild even for him. I think Pirates is pretty extraordinary. I really like the Bob Mayer piece.
Yeah, it's a really nice. It gave me a super... I mean, for someone that obviously I haven't really listened to, I'd heard her name, but I'd not really taken any time to find out who she is. It's a really great piece as an introduction, and kind of give a sense of what she did and why, and how it's a good piece from that perspective as well.
It's really interesting when she talks about, because she won or at least she was nominated for 5 Grammys on that first album. It was one of those, every so often an artist is launched by a major label, like a Nora Jones or something, and they're just sort of instantly huge. And in some ways that's a hard thing to recover from, and I think it was for her. But she had this additional problem that Waits had, in a sense, been not struggling. He was on a major label, but he'd never been nominated for a Grammy. Suddenly it's a bit Star is Born, and she's nominated for 5 Grammys. She won at least one of them, and she talks about how difficult that was for him, and I suspect it was really difficult. Yeah. However, when you fast forward, obviously Tom Waits is, on a kind of cult level, still a pretty giant figure in musical culture now. Rickie Lee's career has slightly tailed off. I'm interested in talking to you about her, partly because I know that you are, you're a musician. You perform jazz, you play jazz. You're very big on jazz, and your jazz. The second of the 3 pieces, at least chronologically, is an interview by Richard Cook, also for NME. And I remember when this came out, because I was at the NME, and most of it's kind of like Rickie Lee Jones. Now, Richard was a great jazz writer, one of the great jazz writers. And it's very interesting that he asks her about jazz, and he says, so why are you using a rock presentation for music that has, jazz allegiances? In other words, why is Rickie Lee not presenting herself as a sort of pure jazz artist? And she says, well, jazz, and this is 1983, jazz is very closed. It's a one-lane road. Today it's very sterile and self-indulgent for musicians. You close off things immediately with a jazz format. I mean, that's something that Richard would have appreciated hearing, since he wrote a lot about jazz.
But I think that's very interesting, especially at that time when we're really starting to get into jazz fusion, and there is a lot of... And I think, possibly reading between the lines slightly here, is jazz was and is very male. And I think if you want to be an active jazz musician who happens to be a woman, it's a lot more difficult. And I think that might be what she's getting at with the closedness of it, in part. And I think also there has been in the past a sort of snobbery about jazz and from jazz musicians as it being kind of a pure art form. You don't want to kind of dabble in pop and stuff. It's not the done thing to be really successful or popular, I think. So that might be...
It sort of makes sense,
yeah,
what she's saying.
It does make sense to me. And it's very interesting as well, because I think now we're at a point where jazz, having been kind of the underdog for a good few years, in the sense that there wasn't much popular jazz in the 80s and 90s, in some senses, it's now has totally opened itself up and is taking a lot from hip-hop, it's taking a lot from funk, it's taking a lot from R&B.
Absolutely, it's really evolved since
really,
then.
really the polar opposite of what she's describing, although I don't think she's wrong to describe it as such when she does so.
Well, that's really helpful, and that makes sense. I mean, look, on a sort of pragmatic level, if she had been presented by Warner Brothers, and she had great mentors there like Lenny Waronker and Russ Teitelman, they really put all their guns behind her. If they had literally presented her as a pure jazz artist, she probably would never have had a huge hit with Chucky's
possibly
in Love,
not, no.
Or been on Saturday Night Live on the cover of Rolling Stone and all of that stuff.
It's not what one hears about for jazz singers, really. Not at that time, anyway.
Exactly. So that's Rickie Lee. She's a sort of fascinating, slightly troubled, eccentric singer-songwriter. I think she deserves to be sort of put in that Laura Nyro kind of. Laura Nyro was a huge influence on her, and I was writing a piece about Laura Nyro once, and I emailed Rickie to ask if I could interview her. Mm-hmm. And instead, she just sent me an incredibly long email all about Laura Nyro, which is the most fantastic and poetic stuff that anyone could say about Laura Nyro, and I was really appreciative of that.
Such a great thing to do.
It was a generous thing to do. I always wish her all the best. This album Kicks, it's got a bizarre collection of covers. There's Mac the Knife, which you could sort of get, but then there's also a cover of Bad Company by Bad Company.
Wow. What?
Which I haven't heard. I don't think it's available yet. But
this comes out next week. Okay, so
it's coming out June 7th.
Catch up on her existing music and then
I think so.
That with some curiosity, because Bad Company is not what I expected you to say there. There are a lot of things that you could have said.
I mean, she's always thrown in these very sort of left field choices. But there we go. Rickie Lee Jones, an American original. Moving on to the featured writer of the week, Harry Doherty, I mentioned earlier. Now, Harry, very sad when he passed away 5 years ago. He was a great friend to Rock's Back Pages and was one of those 70s melody maker writers who were writing about all the acts that sort of literally overnight got kind of jettisoned by punk rock. But he remained loyal to these acts and later wrote books or co-wrote books about Queen, presciently in some ways, and Thin Lizzy. It's just a lovely Irishman. I've picked a Rory Gallagher piece partly because
we've got the audio
have the Rory Gallagher audio. But the biggest of...
I really like this Queen piece.
The Queen piece. Well, I know you're a Queen fan.
I think Queen...
You told me you were sort of raised on... Which Queen was it that you loved?
For some reason...
News of the World.
News of the World is the album that I had on CD for my Walkman when I was a kid. I can't have been older than about 9 or 10 when I bought it with my pocket money at one of those mega music stores in Germany, and I listened to it obsessively. I thought it was great. I don't know, weirdly the two biggest tracks of that album are We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions, which are pretty much dud tracks as far as I'm concerned. I think they're horribly overplayed and kind of tedious. I agree. But the rest of the album is just brilliant. Right. It's hard rock, there's some jazz, there's all sorts of stuff going on there, and I think they're great. So
fantastic. Well, so Freddie's actually on tour with Queen and Thin Lizzy on the east coast of America in a sort of viciously cold winter of late 76 going into early 77.
It's a pretty wild combo of Thin Lizzy and the Queen on the same tour. It's like...
Yeah, well, there's talk in the piece about why, and Queen thought that Lizzy would challenge them to some extent.
And apparently they really loved one particular Thin Lizzy album, I can't remember which, but they used to have it. I think that during some photo shoot, they requested it was played in the background to kind of keep them relaxed kind of thing. I think that's a cool
Well, I mean,
aside.
in a way, it was a generous kind of choice because Thin Lizzy were a great live band. So, you know what these huge bands are like or were like. They don't really want a support act that's in any way going to blow them off the stage, as the cliche used to be. There's some funny things in this piece, and one of them is, of course, inevitably Freddie. Mainly, Harry is talking to Brian May and Roger Taylor, and Freddie apparently has already decided he's not going to do interviews. He says he's playing the star card to the max. It's strange to see at airports that Freddie doesn't mingle with the rest of the band, who mingle with Lizzy. Freddie will be sat at another part of the lounge, accompanied by his friendly neighbourhood masseur and other friends. And true to his adorable camp nature, he's not doing interviews, as he explained to me at one after-show party. Eyeing me from the other side of the room, he sauntered over, gave my bum a gentle pat, and whispered, "Harry, darling, I'm so sorry about the interview, but I'm just not giving them any more. No exceptions."
That's wonderful.
Isn't that just great?
It's just peak Freddie, it really is peak
It is peak Freddie, and what I'm reminded of looking back at these Doherty pieces, I remember him contacting us and saying, I've got a bunch of pieces, and I'd actually like to write either like little intros or postscripts to them. So he talks here about, the postscript to this is that after this interview came out in Melody Maker, he went to see Elton John at the Rainbow Theatre and saw Brian May and Roger Taylor in the audience. So he went up to say hello. Apparently Brian May had seen the piece and wasn't best pleased.
Really?
And he said in a rather petulant fashion, "Nobody blows us off in Boston. Boston is our town. Nobody blows us off, and Thin Lizzy didn't." Hilarious. And
wow,
the other part
that's so sensitive.
Well, he does. It really is. And he even says, "You weren't even there. You left with Lizzy before we came on," which Harry says wasn't true. So,
but I do love that that's something that we can get on RBP, is these little postscripts or intros and that kind of thing. I just think it's such a great addition to, particularly when it's a historical piece, is to get that reflection from
Exactly. It makes my job worth all the anguish that we go through. The last of Harry's pieces, and it also comes with, well, this comes with a little prologue. It's an interview with, he was very early on, an early champion of Kate Bush. For whatever reason, Melody Maker sent him to interview Kate Bush at a time when I guess some people might have thought that she was just going to be a one-hit wonder with Wuthering Heights, you know. So she goes...
Very early. She's like 19.
She's 19, and he goes to the Bush family home, which I think was in like Kent or Sussex or somewhere. And in the prologue he says, "I remember this interview with massive warmth. I knew me and Kate were obviously getting along because this was done at the family house, and the mammy," lovely Irish term, "the mammy was making us tea. Kate's lovely, adorable mammy was Irish, and the house exuded the glow that only happy Irish families can give." It's a great interview in some ways. I mean, 19-year-olds are going to talk in rather bland cliches at the best of times. Sure. But Kate does talk. She addresses things like the whole marketing of her as a sex symbol, that she says she'd been to EMI's promotion department to ask that the sex symbol angle wasn't overplayed.
Fair play.
And says that the sex symbol thing didn't even occur to me until I noticed it kept coming up in interviews. But she also, I mean, she says, interestingly, when I'm at the piano writing a song, I like to think I'm a man, not physically, but in the areas that they explore. Rock and roll and punk, you know, they're both really male music. And I'm not sure I understand that yet, but I'm really trying. When I'm at the piano, I hate to think that I'm a female because I automatically get a preconception. Every female you see at the piano is either Lindsay DePaul or Carole King, that lot, and that sort of stuff is very sweet and lyrical, but it doesn't push it on you. And most male music really lays it on you. It's like an interrogation.
That's really interesting. It's especially interesting given another piece that I want to talk about later on, which is Christine and the Queens. But I think that's a fascinating thing to say, and to say at that time as well, is, I don't know, I think because often people talk about inhabiting certain personas or perspectives in order to write, but that's a very sort of blanket statement about, I don't want to access that in my writing. And I think possibly it's something to do with the time as well, where there were more preconceptions about who you could be as a singer-songwriter, Indeed. As a woman.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a fascinating thing.
I do think it is interesting to think of this extraordinarily attractive girl sitting at the piano and sort of consciously saying, well, I am not going to be Lindsay DePaul here. I don't know what I'm going to be, but I'm going to sort of not inhabit that persona.
Yeah.
And I think there's no doubt that Kate Bush did an extraordinary job of not playing up to kind of certainly male preconceptions.
Not pigeonholing herself either, and I think that's probably why she managed, because...
I mean, I think she's a genius. I really do. I think the music she went on to make particularly... I mean, curiously never really loved Wuthering Heights and thought this is like a novelty act.
Right.
But then I started to hear the stuff on, well, certainly The Kick Inside, I think, was you sort of thought, oh, wow, this girl can write extraordinary songs and also arrange them in really novel
and they do exactly what she's says that she's setting out to do, which is be there and kind of kick you in the face kind of thing.
Completely.
They're very much in front of you and they make you pay attention to them, which I think is what makes it exciting.
So I mentioned that there's a Rory Gallagher piece from 76, and it's really Harry talking to Rory about... You got to remember that Rory Gallagher, 1971, he was Melody Maker's top musician of the year, polling above Eric Clapton, who was obviously a big influence on him. He says in the piece, you know, he talks about kind of just his love of sort of no-frills, gimmick-free, like blues rock, really. And he says the Irish are usually a bit cynical about gimmicks and stuff. You can see there's a theme here, Irishness and so forth. Harry Doherty, Rory Gallagher, Kate Bush's family. None of this was planned, I hasten to add. But, I mean, why don't we segue into the audio interview?
Yeah, I think that's a neat
This isn't
segue.
Harry talking to Rory, but it is Cliff White.
And it's a few years later
him in
as well.
78, I think, isn't it? So let's just hear a little clip from Rory.
You record live with the other two guys in the studio?
Yes.
That's great. You don't go in for too many layers of...
No. I in times gone by, I've actually done live lead guitar, live vocal, and then dubbed on rhythm guitar. But this time around, and the last couple of albums, I've realised that that's strictly a fantasy about the 50s. I mean, I still try and go for a live vocal and a live lead guitar. And as often as not, I get the live lead come rhythm and stick the vocal on later, and then stick a bit of a rhythm, depending on the song. But I used to be sort of adamant about doing live vocals. I don't know why. I think I used to feel uncomfortable without a guitar.
So that's Rory talking about recording live in the studio, you know, which parts he wants to perform live, and how he's kind of shifted that over the course of his recording career, and how he initially was kind of hesitant to sing without a guitar in his hand. And I think that's actually quite a common thing for musicians, guitarists who sing as well, to say, is that they don't feel comfortable just singing. Yeah. But so he's talking about that and just his approach to recording live.
Absolutely. So the reason we're running this audio interview with Rory Gallagher is there's a new blues-oriented album of Gallagher tracks that's about to come out. And Rory Gallagher was one of a large number of sort of white blues rock guitar players that came up in the wake of, you know, Eric Clapton and Peter Green and numerous others. And I remember, you know, being at school, and particularly, so this was like 72, 73. I remember one of my friends had Live in Europe, which had come out in 72. And I remember sort of listening to it and thinking, this is pretty hot guitar playing.
Sure.
I now listen back and think, yeah, he was a good guitar player.
Good guitar player.
But not an extraordinary guitar player.
And pretty derivative overall.
Derivative and of course not a great singer. Now, like Jimi Hendrix wasn't a great singer, but it didn't matter because he was a genius.
Yes.
And Rory Gallagher isn't a genius. He's kind of, you know, it's bar and blues. It's not much more than that.
No.
I mean, I think he comes over rather charmingly in the interview.
He seems like a nice enough chap, really. I mean, he's 78, so 7 years after he was #1 in, was it the NME that you said? Or no, Melody
Yeah,
Maker.
771 Melody Maker, international top musician of the year.
So he's a bit on the wane after that in 78, and he talks about having problems with recording his album that he was trying to do and having to go back and do it again.
Photo finished, they had to just start again.
They had to start again, and he started recording it in London, but kept getting stuck in rush hour traffic, and they just moved the whole operation to recording it in Cologne, which was interesting to me as a personal note. But yeah, just sort of problems he had. He broke his thumb by trapping in a taxi door. It's sort of like things weren't quite going his way, really, I think. But he's got a sense of humour about himself, at least.
Yeah, he seems rather charming to me, and I could listen to that accent all day. I think it's so lovely, and he just sounds like a gentle, warm, friendly guy. Now, I'm not sure that he ended his life in quite that gentle, friendly state. I mean, he died in 95, complications following a liver transplant. I think he had an alcohol problem. That's certainly not evident at all in the guy that you listen to in this interview. I don't know really what to think. He's not someone I've listened to very often. I thought Taste, the band, the power trio that he came out of were quite an interesting band. Played the Isle of Wight, did really well there. Broke up, Rory went solo. I mean, it's kind of generic blues rock.
He played with a few interesting people. Yeah. I mean, like the clip we're going to run at the end of the episode is a really interesting clip where he talks about Jerry Lee Lewis and a really interesting perspective that he provides on Jerry Lee Lewis.
That's absolutely right. And he talks interestingly about Bo Diddley in the piece. There's a conversation about, Chuck Berry always gets all the plaudits as the great. He uses the phrase, the folk poet, which has become kind of received wisdom now. But he says, I think, Bo Diddley, in his way, was just as great a songwriter, So it was nice to hear that.
Shall we have a look at what's new then in the archive?
Let's, Jasper.
Hurrah! So, even in his absence, Mark has very helpfully, having obviously loaded all the stuff up to 1999.
He's nothing if not thoughtful.
Yeah, absolutely. He's given us some highlights that he picked out from some of his pieces, and the first of those is a really funny Paul McCartney to June Harris in Disc magazine in 1963, and Paul's talking to June, saying fun things like, we'll just have to be our crackpot selves. We'll look all English, play Beatles material and sing with Liverpool accents.
Well, this, of course, is just in response before they're about to go to America.
Yeah.
And that is really interesting to hear because, of course, that's exactly what they did. They just turned on the sort of provincial English charm.
Yeah.
Didn't attempt in any way to Americanise themselves.
No.
And, of course, it just went down a storm. So it's really, really interesting to hear that. Just on the eve of this like massive event that's about to occur.
And it launched them as being the biggest act in
America. Just absolutely
world.
fell in love with them, even when they couldn't understand their cute Liverpudlian accents.
Oh, it's so cute.
Yeah. But there's a nice quote also, isn't there, from John Lennon there about anticipating A Hard Day's Night, the film. To me, our most important move next year will be the film. So that's already in the works. I don't want to appear in anything rubbishy, which might make good box office, but won't do anything for us. Well, so they're already really taking quite seriously this idea that this has to be, it can't just be a bit of kind of fluff like an Elvis movie or a surf movie. It's got to be intelligent.
They want to do something good. They want to be artists.
And they did. My God. Sure. I mean, Hard Day's Night is, they got Richard Lester in, a kind of proven film director, and made one of the great pop films, So again, it's really interesting just to sort of the foresight, the planning, the nous.
And it's how they're conscious of what they want to do and what they want to achieve, and I think they pulled it off at that time very, very well.
Absolutely.
So it makes a nice segue to the next piece we're going to talk about, which is Pete Townshend talking to John Mendelsohn, although John apparently claims he didn't write this piece. So where did it come from? We don't know. It's the LA Free Press in 1970.
Or he's just forgotten that he did this piece. But stranger things have happened. I've had pieces that have been credited to other people, and vice versa.
And Pete Townshend, in contrast to what we just heard, every time the Beatles put out a ballad, I spewed. I still can't forgive them for things like Yesterday, which turns me off to this day.
Songs like Yesterday do divide people, don't they? I mean, Townshend couldn't have written a sort of pretty
No.
ballad like that
No.
if you'd paid him £1 million.
He could not have done, and he claims it's necessary for us to be violent. It's our way of compensating for the fact that we're not Tarzan and don't have 12-inch cocks.
Oh, we were doing so well.
We were doing so well, but it had to have.
well.
I mean, it really that is Pete Townsend, I guess.
Yes, Pete Townsend, a very different human being from Paul McCartney. but yeah, I mean, you know, the Beatles, the Stones, and the Who were the three great and very competitive 60s
very competitive,
bands.
Which is
so it's amusing to hear Townsend kind of dissing Yesterday.
It's always
but
nice to get
makes
that
sense.
kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe in yesterday.
Next up, Van Halen's David Lee Roth to Jim Sullivan in the Boston Globe in 1980. And there are some great quotes in this. It's just David Lee Roth going. Excess means happiness to my way of thinking. I've always dealt in excess. Look, you want to do an interview with my parents? This is folk music delivered at high impact. Overkill. I love this. This is great. I have all our reviews divided up into good, bad and worse. And I find that the bad reviews are a lot more fun to read and a lot more colourful adjective-wise.
Well, that's music to our ears, isn't it?
Yeah, we like
because
bad
not everyone
reviews here.
would be quite so sort of generous and magnanimous when it comes to bad reviews. We do love David Lee Roth here. We always did. I mean, I was a huge Van Halen fan, but particularly a fan of his as a frontman because he just took the piss out of the whole thing. He was like
absolutely.
a cartoon of a rock
Absolutely.
god. And I loved that. And certainly one of the most articulate and amusing, witty interviewees you could ever hope to find. A real fan of music, really knew his stuff. I mean, he just gave great quote.
Yeah, he really did.
Just a brilliant showman and a great character,
Yeah.
I think.
You want to know how far I've come in the last 3 years? About 12 feet from the audience to the stage. That's it, man.
Yeah.
And that totally speaks to what you're saying about him being knowledgeable about rock music and sort of
Totally.
understanding how to caricature the rock superstar. Because
And was able not to buy into the hype, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew he wasn't this absurd rock god that he presented on the stage.
Sure.
I mean, he could go back to the dressing room. I mean, look, I'm sure he was up to all the same sort of tricks everyone was. But he was able to go home and remember that he was actually just a nice Jewish guy called David Lee Roth, you know, as opposed to like, I don't know, like Axl Rose,
Sure.
or someone like that, really sort of thinking that they were that important. The next piece here that Mark picked out we're just en passant. This is Johnny Cash talking to Joel Selvin of the San Francisco Chronicle in 1994. So this is just when the first American Recordings albums come out with Rick Rubin. And Johnny has, in a sense, been brought in from the cold by Rick, signed to the American Recordings label. Johnny says, except for some stations that play the classics now and again, it's been a long time, 10 years or more, since they really played one of my records.
Yeah.
You know, and this is one of the giants of country music, and he could not catch a break on country radio.
No.
Nashville just, rejected him, spurned him as a kind of has-been. And, okay, he wasn't in the greatest shape, Johnny, through that period. But I think some of the younger guns who were coming through, people like Dwight Yoakam, were really up in arms about the short shrift that he was getting from Nashville. And that it took this guy, Rick Rubin, most famous for like the Beastie Boys and Slayer and stuff like that, to say, this is an American giant, and we're going to do something different with him.
Yeah.
And American Recordings was very different.
It did work as well.
It worked a treat, within a couple of years. Johnny was playing, or not even that long. I remember that Johnny Cash was playing like the Viper Room in LA, and all these movie stars and hot models were coming to see him. I mean, he was like the sort of the flavour of the month, and it was suddenly like, my God, Johnny Cash is like he's
back.
He's like one of the.
Yeah.
If there was a Mount Rushmore of sort of country music, he'd be the main guy.
Yeah,
in that. And he did a number of albums with Rick Rubin and made some really extraordinary sort of stark Americana music.
Really nice perspective to have that article from exactly that time when that's about to happen. It's
Exactly.
Next up, Friend or Phobic, Stephen Wells in the NME. This is a really interesting piece. It swells on his polemic again, which is great to read.
A terrific polemic.
The fact is that 90% of Guns N' Roses' image and the image of almost all American metal bands is taken from gay clubs, through the Rolling Stones, through the New York Dolls. David Johansen once said, "I'm trisexual, I'll try anything." Axl Rose, by comparison, is a flake, a wimp, and a gutless coward.
Wow. Well, do you know, I couldn't agree more.
Fair point.
Whether you kind of loved Guns N' Roses or not, the homophobia that people like Axl exhibited was and remains profoundly distasteful.
Yeah. And there's another great thing about homophobia in rap, where he says white liberals defend rap's homophobes by claiming that it's all part of some mysterious black culture and that whites have no right to criticise. Tell that to Frankie Knuckles, tell me Sylvester was a honky, and tell Donna Summer, a woman who's made millions out of gays, that it doesn't become her to talk about AIDS as a plague from God. And I think this is really good music writing, because it's political and it's calling out something that was and still is a huge issue.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of homophobia still in the music business, and there's something particularly sickening about it because of the debt that is owed to gay culture in terms of what is cool and what is hip and what is good.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't remember reading this piece at the time, but I mean, I applaud the late, great Stephen Wells for writing this, because we're sitting here today and, you and I can say to each other, there's just nothing cool or funny or anything about homophobia.
No.
It's vile, like any prejudice, anything that makes a judgment about somebody before they've even opened their mouth. And I do remember that it was problematic for, he says, white liberals. One might say, white music critics felt that somehow they couldn't criticise rap or hip-hop artists for just the most outrageous homophobia, because somehow you have to sort of take it on its own terms. Or you're being racist, it's a complicated cultural cluster of problems.
To be sure, but I think it's important that you don't give people a free pass to say whatever the fuck they want just because you can understand where that kind of homophobia comes from and the situations that give rise to it, but that doesn't mean that it's suddenly acceptable or that it should be sort of supported and applauded. And the thing is, it wasn't like it was just black rappers being homophobic. I mean, Eminem, notoriously homophobic for ages and ages, and there was a sort of sense that, he's just being a sort of bad boy, and that's part of his image and persona.
Swaggering.
Well, I don't really care. The fact is that it
foments hate.
Yeah, absolutely.
It foments hate. And in this I'm thinking laterally here, but I, read Tim Jones's piece in The Guardian today about Morrissey, and it's, it just does raise this big issue about, can you enjoy or admire music by someone when you know that they are promulgating prejudice and hatred?
This is a big topic.
This is a huge topic, and I think it's a complicated thing because, it extends out into the whole argument that, X was a sort of dreadful anti-Semite, but 50 years ago wrote this extraordinary symphony. Do we say that? Wagner. Can we not listen to Wagner anymore? It's such a complicated thing. I think each individual has to make the call for themselves.
Absolutely.
Can you still listen to the Smiths? Of course you can still listen to the Smiths, in my view. But it's difficult to listen to the Smiths knowing what we now know about Morrissey's far-right politics.
Yeah, for sure it's difficult. And there's a sort of twofold thing. There's the one side of it, which is the personal, I don't feel comfortable listening to X, Y, or Z because, I know that there were these views that either were being espoused at the time or are being espoused now by whoever made this music or music, film, art, whatever it is. This is a difficult thing. Can bad people make good art? It's that sort of question.
I think it's probably yes.
It's really, and the other side of it is you can make that personal decision not to listen to it for yourself. There's also, should we be supporting them in terms of buying their records and giving them slots on Saturday Night Live. And I think...
Well, especially if they're still alive, right?
Right, especially if they're still alive, that becomes a tricky one. And I think the answer to that, in a way, the answer is easier for that side of it, because I think there is an argument to say, well, no, we shouldn't really be supporting them, because that support allows them to carry on spouting rubbish. You can draw that line.
Fortunately, Morrissey's new album has... and it might in any case have garnered across the board negative reviews. You know, I did see the 1 star in the review last week and sort of think, well, you know, would it have been 2 or 3 stars if there wasn't, you know, a kind of general detestation of
my feeling is that probably yes,
from.
But regardless, I mean, this is a huge topic, and it's not one that I'm sure how I feel about overall, but it's an ongoing, and I think it will become a more and more prominent topic that gets discussed as we have revelation after revelation of people's shoddy behaviour, basically.
Well, and especially, Jasper, at a time like right now when, you know, the lids have come off every jar of hate. Everybody now, I mean, people feel entitled and emboldened to say the most disgusting things now on social media, in media generally. It seems like now there's just no sort of decency or sensitivity anymore. Everybody's angry, and people like Morrissey aren't helping.
No, they're definitely not helping.
Morrissey wears a For Britain badge on Jimmy Fallon's show. You know,
I'm surprised that Jimmy Fallon...
It's a dog whistle.
I'm surprised that the producers on that show didn't say, look...
They probably didn't know. I suppose Fallon would have seen the badge
that's the
and
problem.
known.
That's the problem, isn't it? But yeah, it's a bit of a kick in the teeth, really.
I do wish more musicians would, you know, of course would just be castigated as sort of woolly left, liberal, consensus or conspiracy. But I wish more musicians right now would band together, put on events to say something about the creeping tide of fascistic behaviour and discourse. You know, I think I just sort of feel like where are the musical voices? It's like people just almost feel like, oh, what's the point? It's so obvious that if I get up and sing a song that attacks all that, it's like, who cares? And I think that's dangerous.
Yeah, I think it is dangerous.
You know, of course, there are people like Billy Bragg who will never tire of. You know, they will always be up there on a soapbox. But you would sort of hope that there was a little bit more banding together of everyone from, like, you know, Bruce Springsteen to, you know,
I mean, the closest you get to that is people like refusing to play at Trump's inauguration and that sort of thing. But I don't think that's as much banding together as it is just kind of not.
I also
wanting to
think there's an element
with.
of like, what's the point in writing a song about Trump? I mean, you know, it's sort of obvious to anyone with a shred of decency or heart or sensitivity that Trump is monstrous. So what's the point in even saying that? It's like, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that the point we've got to in the culture?
I don't know. I think people are writing music about... I mean, there's this album that came out about the amendments to the US Constitution, which it's a compilation album by a whole lot of different artists, and that's a sort of statement. It's a political album by 27 different musicians.
Well, I didn't know about it, so
all sorts of people
kind
involved
of tells
in that.
You its reach, perhaps.
But
Hasn't.
I think people are saying that kind of thing. I think that as far as like the uber mainstream pop musicians, they maybe feel... I mean, like, it took ages for Taylor Swift to say anything negative about
for sure.
anyone,
and
because
of course
you don't want to alienate your fan base, man. It's like,
of course, and you know, I mean, this is where it does become... You really do have to be quite bold and quite brave, especially in a genre like country music, where very, very few country artists have said anything. When you consider what the Dixie Chicks, you know, when they stood up to Bush, where are the artists who, you know, they don't want to alienate their fan base? It's very apparent.
And it's very unfortunate as well, because you think that maybe if people who have an audience of that kind, they might be able to speak to the fan base that they would alienate in a way that would not alienate them, but would perhaps help a little bit change some opinions and some views on that sort of thing.
Well, of course, Willie Nelson, who's got nothing left to lose, you know, he's at the end of his life, at the end of his career, and good for him. He's not out there colluding with the Trump nightmare. And there are Casey Musgraves, there are younger artists who've taken some kind of a stand. Anyway, as you say, it's a massive...
We could go on about this for hours and hours, so I think we should probably... Shall we?
Yes, it's a 5-hour episode. Yes. Mark, you should have been here to stop us. But...
Well, there's an interesting thing, actually, that ties in from another piece that Mark picked, which is a Tony Bennett interview with David Stubbs in The Enemy in 98, where Tony Bennett says, thing is, in America, when you have liberal politics, you're sometimes regarded as some sort of communist. And I think, that's a fair point that Tony Bennett makes there, really, that it is, particularly in America, difficult to be...
Well, you don't need the C word anymore, do you? I mean, liberal is now a dirty word in America.
Absolutely, it's true. It's 100% true.
So forget communism. That's where we've got to. I just want to back up to the previous piece that Mark quoted. It says Oasis review by the ever-amusing Simon Price from October 97. So Oasis at Earl's Court. I just love this. After Magic Pie, a smug, chugging sludge that would appall McCartney, there's an awkward lull. Don't we deserve some applause? Asks Noel. Clap, clap, clap go 20,000 dutiful sea lion flippers. There's lager everywhere, but no one's smiling. Tick, tock. Fabulous. Oof.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Well, so by 97, Oasis have already sort of settled into this kind of very predictable kind of dad rock riffology. I mean, I saw them at Earl's Court in, I guess it must have been 95, and actually, I loathed Oasis. I thought they were
Don't tell me they were good.
Live.
Oh, no.
Well, they were quite good. They were quite powerful.
Okay.
And it would be dishonest of me to say otherwise. It didn't make me like their tired retreads of sort of Beatlesque rock any more than I already did. So I don't know whether by 97 they were any better or worse live, but I love the way Simon Price
just absolutely tears them a new one.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought they were the ultimate sort of reduction of rock to lazy cliche, I think. I still can't take them seriously, and nor do I like
and they're
Noel's
not particularly great
no
people either, so
no, there's something just the way they've behaved and the sort of fratricidal loathing between these two brothers it's not inspiring, is it? Let's be honest.
Let's be real.
You mentioned Tony Bennett. There's another quote that Mark picked out where he says, if you look at my repertoire, I'm trying to make people feel good. Not that Sinatra didn't, but those lonely bluesy songs he did, I never did. And I thought, I saw that and I thought, so that's why I never really loved Tony Bennett that much. I can admire Tony Bennett, but to me, if I'm on a desert island, I've got a kind of case full of Sinatra albums, and I probably haven't got very much. You can't
really, drown in your tears to Tony Bennett. Doesn't really work.
You can't, can you?
No, but I did like he did a couple of duet albums with all sorts of people,
including Amy Winehouse,
Lady Gaga, Willie Nelson, aforementioned. So he's certainly an interesting performer and musician, and did some cool stuff, even if it's maybe doesn't have that rawer side to it.
He's technically a great singer, no doubt. He's a great jazz artist, vocal artist, but does he move me to tears like Sinatra did on his great Capitol albums in the 50s? He doesn't come close. I mean, those Sinatra ballads, there's the great saloon songs, if you like, whether it's One for My Baby or Where Do You Go or I'm a Fool to Want You, because devastating. I mean, I think that's the greatest ballad singing that I know, really.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's...
Male ballad singing. Yeah. I mean, I just don't... The voice is so rich, it's so deep and cavernous, and it just breaks your heart. It's so, there's a vulnerability there. There's a sort of male vulnerability that is rare. It's rare, for sure, in any genre of music. No doubt.
But then, is it a bit unfair? I mean, Tony Bennett is basically saying he didn't want to do that, doesn't do that. Completely. So it's kind of his prerogative to say.
He's not a lonely bluesy guy.
No, he's not.
And
he's a funk.
Sinatra was quite a tormented soul.
Tony Bennett seems. I mean, there's a lovely clip of singing a duet with Lady Gaga where they're just having a fabulous time. Yeah. And I think that's to Tony Bennett's credit, really, that he knows how to have fun with music.
She gets too hungry for dinner at 8.
I'm starving.
She She loves the theater, but she never comes late.
I never bother with people that I hate. That's why this chick is a tramp.
She does it like...
Couple more pieces that I picked out from the last 20 years or so. First of which I wanted to talk about, it's about Gnarls Barkley. It's an interview with the two of them. Of course, Gnarls Barkley, although at the time it was kind of obscured slightly as is it one guy or what is it, but it was a collaboration between Danger Mouse and CeeLo Green. And it's an interview with them with Angus Beattie and Mojo in 2006. And so this is right when Crazy had been a massive, massive hit. You know, it's a huge track that year. And it's full of interesting tidbits, like the fact that the song that Danger Mouse produced, which kind of launched him a little bit after... Well, of course, Danger Mouse got known after he did the Grey album, which was a remix of Jay-Z and the Beatles' Black and White albums. But then he produced Dare with Gorillaz, and that was knocked off its chart summit position by the Pussycat Dolls' Don't Ya, which I think is a great little snippet of 2006 pop history. But also, CeeLo Green is talking in this. Of course, CeeLo Green went off the rails a bit lately. You know, he was accused of sexual battery and slipping someone ecstasy and was convicted of just the latter thing. Managed to get away with only 3 years probation. I actually saw him live, like, around that time in 2014, and it wasn't good. He was a mess. He was really... was on stage at a festival, and he just kind of came on, and he was clearly not in the best frame of mind. And it's a shame because there are a couple of his tracks, like Crazy, is just phenomenal. I love that.
He's a great singer, isn't he?
And he's got a great voice. And
this sort of almost gospelish kind of voice that works so well with Danger Mouse's very unique
production.
Sound world,
absolutely
soundscape.
And they're interesting in this interview about not, you know, at this point the Gnarls Barkley persona shtick has run a bit thin, but they talk interestingly about like why they wanted to make that record and what kind of went into it. And one thing most people I think don't know is that Crazy as a song was, I mean, heavily inspired by film scores of spaghetti westerns, Morricone and so on, but actually more specifically it samples the soundtrack to the spaghetti western Django Prepare a Coffin. The soundtrack was by people that you've never heard of, probably Gianpiero Reverberi and Gianfranco Reverberi.
You're absolutely right. Never heard of them.
Never heard of them, and you hadn't heard the song till I played it earlier, but it is a great bit of spaghetti western soundtrack. Yes. I have a soft spot for spaghetti westerns and their soundtracks. They're just absolutely brilliant. And Crazy not only samples that song, but utilises parts of the main melody and the chord structure and everything, and so they're actually co-credited as songwriters on Crazy. And it's a really fun thing to hear and go, holy shit, it is that. It's exactly Crazy, but as a spaghetti... I think it's a fun little fact about that.
I remember when I lost my mind. There was something so pleasant about that place. Even your emotions have an echo in so much space.
They were really, really interesting. And Crazy was just one of those great kind of pop singles.
I think one of the great singles of that decade, basically.
Yeah, definitely. It was everywhere, wasn't it?
And the last piece I picked out is Christine and the Queens. Kate Mossman goes to see her live, and it's got a lovely title, Why Christine and the Queens Makes Me Feel Like I'm 10 years old and Climbing a Tree. And this is from last year in the New Statesman. I think this is a really lovely piece. It's a great live review. It gets across the sense that it was a really fun gig to be at, but also talks interestingly in light of... So Christine and the Queens is an alter ego of
Héloïse
Letizier.
I practiced that earlier.
And she's pansexual and genderqueer, and then for the second album, further development of an alter ego, just became Chris as an alter ego. So Kate Mossman is really interesting about that as a thing and how that is reflected in her live performance. She says, I'm sure I'm not the only woman in the audience for whom Letizier stirs up a very strong, half-forgotten feeling of wanting to be a boy. Dolls were thrown out of my pushchair when I was small. I said they were slimy. I never owned a dress. For my 4th birthday, someone, no one can remember who, bought me a sword, a helmet and shield in bronze plastic. My first love, Freddie, and I met at nursery. We planned to get married and become builders. It's a lovely piece of writing. B, I think it speaks to something very interesting in contemporary, it ties in exactly with what
contemporary
Kate Bush,
identity.
Identity
exactly.
in general.
Yeah.
Ties in exactly with what Kate Bush was saying in
absolutely
that interview that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Great piece, well worth a read. I want to go see Christine and the Queens after that review.
I love her. I mean, I do think it's just extraordinary.
It's brilliant. I mean, it's really great musician.
A kind of new kind of pop icon. I think the music is fabulous, melodically, lyrically.
And she's
haven't seen her live. I would love to see.
She's very iconoclastic and very much just herself, which is really refreshing and fun
and just truly liberating. I do think she's been part of a kind of process of liberation for sure, particularly for young female pop fans. Yeah, terrific, great. Well, Kate's always great on music in the New Statesman and elsewhere. So I think that brings us to a close, doesn't it, Jasper? And,
I think it does.
We're going to just go out really with another snippet of the audio from Rory Gallagher where he's talking about the great and quite scary Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah. Well, let's roll that clip and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Mark will be back next week, and I believe we have a very special guest, the 60s pop writer par excellence, Dawn James, that Mark is often talking about. A real living legend of pop journalism. Please join us next week. We'll see you then. I
can't wait for Mark to fanboy about Dawn James in person. It's going to be great. Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye.
To me, he is the rock and roll artist. I mean, he is vocally, instrumentally, even the country stuff. It's just when you watch Jerry Lee Lewis, you know something's going on. I mean, he's more dangerous than the Sex Pistols. I mean, right down the line, anything could happen. He could pull a pistol out and shoot someone in the audience. I mean that and even in the studio when I did the sessions, he was he came in with a real Sears Roebuck type sweatshirt, red pants, white socks, and like white patent shoes. And Kenny Jones came in to play drums, and Kenny came in also dressed like a peacock, with a tartan this and a tartan that. And Jerry Lee didn't like it. He says, "Boy, you're going to have to go. You got two showmen in here, And he's explaining to us how he got away with so much drinking. He used to drink, he said, a quarter milk after he got drunk at night and a quarter milk in the morning. And that's why he looked fine. But I swear to God, he lifted a Steinway up in the studio to show us what he meant about some show. I mean, he was... So it's as genuine as... It's not like a 9 to 5 thing with him.
That was Rory Gallagher in conversation with Cliff White in 1978, concluding this week's Rock's Back Pages podcast. The host was Barney Hoskyns, and it was co-hosted and produced by Jasper Murison-Bowie. For a list of articles discussed and full show notes, please visit rocksbackpages.com/podcast. You can find thousands of articles, as well as hundreds of full-length audio interviews at rocksbackpages.com.
That's why the lady is a tramp.
Beautiful.